Anybody with a grain of common sense would see that it's not wise or prudent to continue on this path. It's actually reckless. It's reckless policy from government. I mean, I called him a disgrace, and I'll continue calling him a disgrace for his behaviour, because the question was a genuine question, and unfortunately it appears to have hit a raw nerve. I think Fianna Fáil are completely disconnected, as is the Minister for Housing. This is an issue of real and genuine concern. We have a situation where, looking at immigration across the board, not at any particular category, we don't have a proper functioning immigration system. We have a situation now, our housing is under severe strain. Every year, not looking at the Ukrainian situation, but every year we had between 4,000 and 5,000 immigrants anyway coming into Ireland. But now we have 1,500 extra every month on top of the 4,000 to 5,000 every year. We have a situation where our homeless figures are continuing to rise. And what we see here is the government attempting to create another crisis. That's what's happening here. In trying to resolve one crisis, they're actually creating a deep crisis. And what it means for people is that there'll be many families, unfortunately, languishing on housing lists. There'll be many young couples who will be continue to be failed and locked out of the housing market, who won't be able to get affordable housing, because I feel that the minister, the fact that he has not planned for the influx. And the fact that he was so resistant to my question, which was, have you planned for this? Would you be willing to plan in terms of the impact on provision of housing for our people here? Anybody with a grain of common sense would see that it's not wise or prudent to continue on this path. It's actually reckless. It's reckless policy from government. And the fact that the minister, I suppose, reacted in the way he did, really does, I suppose, take away the credibility from him as Minister for Housing. I mean, I called him a disgrace, and I'll continue calling him a disgrace for his behaviour, because the question was a genuine question, and unfortunately it appears to have hit a raw nerve. But we do know that it was reported that a senior civil servant informed the Cabinet that there was a risk to social cohesion if this continued, if this reckless manner in which the influx of immigrants are coming in continued. Now, that was not my words. That was a senior civil servant. So obviously that hit a raw nerve with Minister O'Brien. I suspect that's what happened, because he then twisted that and told me that I was a risk and my questions were a risk to social cohesion, which was total nonsense.
What do you think of O'Brien's argument that he said the money that the government is setting aside for housing for native people living here in Ireland is separate to the money that's being put aside for Ukrainian refugees, and that these two things are not related and that they shouldn't be linked together? What would you say to that argument?
I don't believe that for a second. I mean, we see that the housing policy that the government here is pursuing is failing. It's failing people miserably by the day. We are seeing the waiting lists for housing growing longer. As I say, there's young couples locked out of the housing market who can never own a home. These are professional people, and they have no affordable housing either. So I don't believe that to be true for a second. I think the minister is disingenuous to come out with something like that. We know before any crisis or before any war ever erupted, our housing system was under severe pressure. It was in crisis already.
What do you think of the fact that Sinn Fein TD Kathleen Funkin went on the radio after your exchange, and she essentially sided with the minister? She said that the way in which you had brought up the issue, I believe she said it was very right wing, essentially saying it was far right and it could incite hatred and this type of language. What do you think of that?
That's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I was very disappointed to actually see that, because I would have regarded Deputy Funkin as being a reasonable and fair TD, fair-minded, but that's absolutely not true. I'm neither left wing or right wing. I'm a reasonable person with common sense, and if having common sense is going to label me right wing, well, so be it. But at the end of the day, we have to question these policies. We have to question the reckless, and it would serve Sinn Fein better to question the recklessness of the path that's being pursued here, because it's absolutely reckless and it will have a lasting impact on society. But I do feel that certainly those type of comments are unwelcome, totally unwelcome, and also show that Sinn Féin is also out of touch. In terms of this issue, they're out of touch majorly. I mean, really, is there any difference between a big opposition party like Sinn Féin and government? There isn't in regard to this issue. Certainly isn't. They seem to be all clubbing together.
A couple of months ago, there was a poll done which found that 60% of Irish people say they want a cap on the number of Ukrainians that we allow into the country. And in response to yourself and also Deputy Matty McGrath, the government and the opposition made some very strong comments about how these remarks were a disgrace and so on and so forth. Do you not think that's sort of almost an indirect attack on the electorate as well, because of so many people also hold the same views as yourself?
Yes, it is an attack on the electorate for sure, and it also shows disconnect and arrogance, doesn't it? To pursue something that's reckless, that's against the wishes of 60% of people is absolute arrogance and needs to be called out.